The crystal wine glasses clinked against granite countertops as my brother Mark led another tour through his brand-new McMansion. This was the fourth group he'd guided to the marble foyer, up the sweeping staircase, and past the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased his professionally landscaped backyard. Each tour ended the same way, with Mark standing in his gourmet kitchen, gesturing expansively at the stainless steel appliances and custom cabinetry. "This is what success looks like," he announced to his captive audience of neighbors, college friends, and family members. His voice carried that particular tone of someone who'd finally made it and wanted everyone to know. I stood near the kitchen island, nursing my glass of champagne and trying to look appropriately impressed. My simple navy dress and department store heels felt out of place among the designer outfits and luxury accessories worn by Mark's guests, which was exactly the impression I wanted to give. "Katie, come here," Mark called out, spotting me by the breakfast nook. "I want everyone to meet my sister." The current tour group turned to look at me with polite interest. I recognized a few faces from Mark's investment firm, others from our childhood neighborhood, all successful professionals in their 30s, the kind of people who measured worth by square footage and luxury car models. "This is Katie," Mark said, slinging his arm around my shoulders with practiced brotherly affection. "She's still finding her way, aren't you, sis? Working on some little consulting projects, living in that cute apartment downtown." The group smiled with the kind of sympathetic warmth reserved for people's less fortunate relatives. Poor Katie, still struggling while her younger brother had clearly figured out the secret to success. "But being here tonight," Mark continued, gesturing around his showcase kitchen, "maybe you'll get inspired. Maybe you'll finally understand what real achievement looks like and start making some serious life changes." I smiled back, playing my part perfectly. The older sister who'd never quite lived up to her potential, who needed her baby brother to show her how the world really worked. If they only knew. I checked my phone discreetly. 7:43 p.m. The paperwork had been filed at 5:00 p.m. sharp, which meant the process server should arrive any moment now. I timed this perfectly. "Mark's always been the ambitious one in the family," I said, raising my champagne glass. "Always thinking big, always reaching higher." The group murmured agreement. Here was a supportive sister acknowledging her brother's superior talents. What they didn't know was that Mark's ambitious thinking had led him to leverage every asset he owned, including his retirement accounts and this house, to fund increasingly risky investment schemes. What they didn't know was that his firm's biggest client, the one responsible for the bonuses that paid for this mansion, was a shell company I'd created 3 years ago. What they definitely didn't know was that I'd been quietly buying up his debt for months, consolidating his various loans and credit lines under my investment company's portfolio. "Let me show you the master suite," Mark announced, leading the group toward the staircase. "Wait until you see the walk-in closet. It's bigger than most people's bedrooms." As they climbed the stairs, I remained in the kitchen, checking my phone again. A text from my legal team. "Process server en route. ETA 7:50 p.m. Perfect timing. I wandered through the first floor, admiring Mark's taste in expensive furnishings. The leather sectional in the living room probably cost more than most people's cars. The dining room table could seat 12. The home theater system looked like something from a luxury yacht. All of it financed with money he didn't actually have, secured against assets he was about to lose. My phone buzzed with another message from my assistant. Sullivan Industries board meeting confirmed for Monday. Acquisition papers ready for signature. Mark's tour group was coming back downstairs, their voices animated as they discussed square footage and property values. I rejoined them in the kitchen, where Mark was opening another bottle of champagne. "To success," he announced, raising his glass. "To working hard, taking risks, and never settling for mediocrity. Everyone raised their glasses enthusiastically. I lifted mine as well, thinking about the very different definition of risk management I'd learned over the past decade. "Katie, you should really pay attention to this," Mark said, turning to me with that big brother wisdom tone he perfected. "This house represents everything you could achieve if you just stop playing it safe and start thinking bigger." "It's definitely impressive," I agreed. "The financing alone must have been complicated." His face flushed slightly. Mark had always been sensitive about money talk, especially the details of how he afforded his lifestyle. "Smart investments," he said quickly. "Leveraging opportunities. Building equity. Standard wealth-building strategies." I nodded thoughtfully. Leveraging can be powerful, though I imagine the monthly payments on a place like this must be significant. "Nothing I can't handle," he replied, but I caught the slight edge in his voice. He knew exactly how close to the edge he was living. That's when the doorbell rang. Mark frowned, checking his watch, expecting someone else. His wife Jennifer asked from across the kitchen. "No, everyone should be here already." The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. "I'll get it," Mark said, setting down his champagne and heading toward the foyer. I followed at a discreet distance, along with several curious guests. Through the decorative glass panels beside the front door, I could see a woman in a business suit holding an official-looking envelope. Mark opened the door with his host smile still in place. "Can I help you?" "Mark Sullivan?" "Yes, that's me. I'm serving you with official notice of foreclosure proceedings. Property now owned by K. Sullivan Enterprises." The words hit the foyer like a physical blow. Mark's face went white as he stared at the envelope being pressed into his hands. "Foreclosure?" Jennifer's voice cracked from behind him. "That's impossible. We're current on our mortgage." The process server consulted her clipboard. "According to the documentation, all outstanding debts secured against this property have been consolidated and called in by the new line holder. You have 30 days to vacate." Mark's hand shook as he opened the envelope, scanning the official documents inside. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and growing horror as the reality sank in. "K. Sullivan Enterprises," he read aloud. "What the hell is K. Sullivan Enterprises?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my voice perfectly calm. "That would be me, Mark." The foyer fell silent except for the sound of Jennifer's sharp intake of breath. "Katie Sullivan Enterprises," I clarified. "My investment company. The one that's been quietly purchasing your various debts over the past 6 months." Mark stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Your what?" I pulled out my phone, opening the corporate banking app that showed K. Sullivan Enterprises' current assets. "My investment company. Current portfolio value approximately $2.3 billion, with holdings in commercial real estate, technology startups, and distressed debt acquisition." The number on my screen made Jennifer grab Mark's arm for support. "Distressed debt acquisition," I continued, "is when you buy up someone's loans at a discount from desperate lenders. Your mortgage company was happy to sell your note after you missed 2 payments last month. Your credit card companies were equally eager to unload your balances after you exceeded your limits." Mark's mouth opened and closed without sound. "The really interesting purchase was your margin debt from the investment firm. Did you know they were planning to call in your leveraged positions next week? I saved them the trouble." I scrolled through my phone, showing him the complete portfolio of his financial obligations. Total consolidated debt, $1.7 million. Total assets securing that debt. This house, your investment accounts, your cars, and your boat. The housewarming guests stood frozen in the foyer, witnessing the complete collapse of their host's carefully constructed success story. But how? Mark whispered. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that old car. You work freelance consulting. I smiled, the same patient smile I'd been giving him all evening. Mark, I live in the penthouse of a building I own. I drive a 10-year-old Toyota because it's reliable and draws no attention. And my consulting clients include Fortune 500 companies who pay me 7 figures to optimize their AI systems. Jennifer sank into the decorator chair by the front door. This isn't happening. I'm afraid it is, I said gently, though I'm not unreasonable. Mark, you have options. He looked up from the foreclosure papers, desperate hope flickering in his eyes. Option 1. You declare bankruptcy, lose everything, and start over with nothing. Option 2. You accept my job offer. Job offer? I pulled out another document from my purse. Senior Vice President of Strategic Development at Sullivan Industries. Starting salary $150,000 with performance bonuses. Enough to rent a nice house. Not enough to buy a mansion you can't afford. Mark stared at the employment contract. You're offering me a job? After this? I'm offering you a chance to learn what success actually looks like, I corrected. Real success, built on sustainable business practices and actual value creation. The process server had finished her duties and left. The housewarming guests began quietly gathering their coats, clearly uncomfortable with witnessing such a private family catastrophe. I don't understand, Mark said, still holding both the foreclosure notice and the job offer. Why would you do this? I looked around the marble foyer at the expensive chandelier and custom millwork that had been bought with borrowed money and false confidence. Because 3 years ago, you stood in my actual apartment, the one you call tiny, and told me I was wasting my potential. You said I needed to think bigger, take more risks, stop being afraid of real success. I gestured at the foreclosure papers in his hands. You were right about thinking bigger, but you confused success with the appearance of success. You confused assets with wealth. You confused leverage with power. Mark's carefully styled hair had fallen across his forehead, making him look younger and more vulnerable. I thought I was winning. You were performing, I said softly. There's a difference. Jennifer stood up from the chair, mascara smudge, but composure returning. The job offer, is it real? Completely real. Mark has skills I can use. Sales ability, relationship management, strategic thinking. He just needs to learn how to apply them sustainably. I turned back to my brother. But Mark, if you take this position, you work for me, not with me for me. You follow my business model, my ethics, my timeline. And you never, ever use family leverage to circumvent company policies. He looked down at the employment contract, reading through the terms carefully. For the first time all evening, he was actually thinking before speaking. The salary, he said finally, it's less than I made at the firm. It's also guaranteed for 3 years, with health benefits, retirement matching, and profit sharing. No commission pressure, no leveraged positions, no gambling with other people's money. I pulled out my keys, removing one from the ring. There's also a company car. Nothing flashy, but reliable. Better than losing your current lease to bankruptcy. Mark took the key, turning it over in his palm. A company car? Mark, I said gently, real wealth isn't about impressing people. It's about building something that lasts. Something that grows without destroying everything around it. He was quiet for a long moment, looking around the foyer that would soon belong to someone else. The house, he said finally. What happens to the house? I'll sell it to cover your debts and give you a fresh start. Any excess goes toward your employee stock options at Sullivan Industries. Jennifer stepped forward. Stock options? If the company continues growing at current rates, those options will be worth significantly more than this house in 5 years. The difference is, you'll own them free and clear. I checked my watch. You have until Monday morning to decide. The job starts Tuesday if you want it. Mark looked at Jennifer, then back at me. Why now? Why reveal all this tonight? I smiled, thinking about all the family gatherings where Mark had patronized me, all the times he'd offered unsolicited advice about my career choices, all the moments he'd assumed his lifestyle meant he was winning. Because you invited me to your housewarming to show me what success looks like, I thought I'd return the favor. I gathered my purse and headed toward the door, pausing to look back at the scene. Mark holding foreclosure papers and a job offer, Jennifer calculating whether pride was worth more than financial security, and their expensive house suddenly feeling like a mausoleum of borrowed dreams. Oh, and Mark? The consulting work you thought was so small scale. My last project was redesigning the AI architecture for the Federal Reserve's trading systems. The contract was worth $47 million. I opened the front door, then turned back one more time. Real success doesn't need a housewarming party to prove it exists. It just builds, quietly and steadily, until you're ready to use it for something that matters. The next morning, I sat in my actual office on the 34th floor of the Sullivan Industries headquarters, reviewing Monday's board meeting agenda. My assistant brought coffee and the weekend's business reports, including the real estate portfolio performance and the latest acquisition opportunities. Ms. Sullivan, your brother called 3 times this morning. Should I schedule an appointment? I looked out over the city skyline, thinking about the difference between building wealth and performing wealth, between earning respect and demanding it. Send him the employee handbook and the company orientation schedule. If he's serious about learning how business actually works, he can start by reading the policies. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Mark spent all night going through the employment contract. We want to accept. When can he start? I smiled, typing back. Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Dress code is business casual. No need to impress anyone with expensive suits. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone's dreams. Sometimes it's showing them the difference between dreams and illusions, between success and its shadow. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they're ready to learn. 3 months later, Mark sent me a quarterly report that was both thorough and insightful, analyzing market trends with the kind of careful attention he'd never shown when gambling with leveraged investments. His email signature read, Mark Sullivan, Senior VP Strategic Development, Sullivan Industries. Building sustainable growth since 2024. At the bottom, he'd added a personal note. Thanks for teaching me the difference between having money and building wealth. The view from solid ground is better than I expected. I printed the report and filed it in my desk drawer, next to the foreclosure notice from his housewarming party. Some lessons are worth saving.